Newsflash, if you feel like money is causing fights or stress in your relationship, it's actually probably not about the money. There is so much that goes deeper below the surface in relationships that can cause us to argue about money. So, I wanted to explore this topic a little bit further. So, today I am bringing on Railey Molinario, and she is a renowned love educator and relationship coach who empowers individuals to live fulfilling lives through her teachings on relationship intelligence. With a remarkable journey from abandonment at birth to six-figure boss, Railey has gained recognition and has been featured on prominent platforms such as BBC, Peanut, Medium, and Sovereign magazine. As a respected leader in the industry, Railey provides the world with skills and knowledge needed to cultivate thriving relationships and lives. Her signature program, the Power Couple PhD, utilizes her proven formula to guide couples to build long-lasting and thriving relationships. I hope you enjoy this interview today. All right, hello there, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today, Railey. How are you today?
I'm really good. I'm really, really good. Thank you.
Great. So again, I feel like we should maybe kind of explain why I have a relationship expert on when I'm a financial coach. And a lot of the topic and content on my channel is all related to personal finance, but we also do talk a lot about it having a lot to do with the relationship dynamic. And I know that when you and I spoke previously, we kind of talked about how, people say that, money fights or money stress is like a primary cause of divorces and problems in relationships. But we were, saying it's never about the money, right? It's always about so much deeper beyond that too. So I'm really excited to share with everybody your experiences as well, so that people can really just kind of focus on the relationship side of things also. So I mentioned in the intro, when I was talking about your bio, a little bit about your own personal story of abandonment and your lived experiences too. I'm wondering if you can kind of just, elaborate a little bit for everybody so that we can get to know you and your story just a little bit better.
Absolutely. I started my journey when I was abandoned by my father at birth and left to sleep in the snow. I then grew up with my mother and my stepfather in this extremely rough and abusive and neglectful household. There was so much chaos and violence that it became so much by the time I was 16. I decided to leave home and try to make it in the world on my own. When I left home, I had the book smarts. So when I was a child, I was labeled as academically gifted. And leaving home at 16, you get street smarts. So you're able to get a house and a car, and I was able to create that life for myself. But I knew, even from when I was a child, that there was something missing. And so when I was in university studying for 2 degrees, working 2 jobs, had all of these things on the outside, I was really suffering on the inside. That trauma that I had brought with me wasn't cured just because I left my environment. And so it got to the point with so much anxiety, so much depression, that I decided one day I was going to take my life. And I took myself to a hotel and decided that that was what I was going to do. Before making that life-changing decision, I asked myself one question: do I actually want to die, or do I want the suffering to end? And in that moment, I realized that those were two different things. That if I could create a different existence for myself, if I could create a life that was connective and happy and joyful and purposeful, then that's actually something that I wanted to participate in. And so I had nothing to lose and a really big imagination. And that's how I started on my journey.
Wow, that is really profound. And I love when you said, even though you took yourself out of that situation, it's not like, the past of the trauma that had been inflicted on the past, it doesn't just like magically go away because you get out of that situation. So I'm so glad that you were able to, in the super dark depths of where you were, glad that you were able to like completely just kind of stop and reframe and say like, is that what I want, or do I really just want to change my life and thrive? And knowing that within you, you even had that capability, I think that is outrageously powerful. Yeah, that's really great. Um, Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about how, that is, your personal story about how, you kind of pulled yourself out of situations that were dark and not healthy and all that. But that's also a little bit in younger life too. And then how do you feel like some of that lived experience has sort of translated into, the work that you've done yourself, and then also the work that you now do with other couples? Because we can always do a lot of work on ourselves, but then how do we relate with other people, being informed by our pasts also? Yeah, can you just talk a little bit more about how all of that has led to where you are now in helping other couples?
When I was starting on my journey, I had nowhere to begin. I had no idea what I was doing. Back then, I think YouTube had just come out, but we didn't have social media and we didn't have so much access as we do now. So I didn't even know where to start. We weren't really talking about mental health the way that we do in our times now. And so I didn't know where to begin. The first thing that I did was start listening to motivational speeches by Les Brown and Tony Robbins because I knew the tape in my head wasn't serving me. I was constantly repeating all of the things that I heard from my parents. I was repeating all of the things that I believed myself, that I wasn't good enough, that my life was never going to change. And so I knew I had to change that tape. And hearing those inspirational words from those people allowed me to start understanding what it sounded like. I didn't believe it in the beginning, but at least I knew what those words sounded like. And from there, I just researched and taught myself all the things that I hadn't yet learned. So as I said, when I was a child, I was academically gifted. I learned very quickly. And so I didn't know really where to find this information, but I just took it one day at a time. And I started to research and read books and go to seminars and talk to people and absorb all of this information about how to have a better relationship with myself. When it came to then figuring out how to have successful relationships with other people, I did the same thing. I started researching the science. I started researching, reading different books by different doctors and therapists and scientists and all these different things. And I started to put these pieces together. Prior to me becoming a love educator, I had terrible relationships. I had some good ones, but I also had some really terrible ones. And once I had all of this information and had all of these resources, I realized that I can't be the only one. That all of these mistakes that I was making because of what I saw on TV, because of what I saw from my parents, because of the communities that I was in, I realized that so many of us are suffering from poor relationships. So that's when I decided that I was going to create an environment where people can learn this information. Because the first thing that I ask people when I work with them is, when were you taught how to have a thriving relationship? And they're always like, well, that's a weird question. I've never been asked that before. But when they think about it, they realize I haven't. And I go through it with them. Have you learned from your parents? Did they sit you down and open up a book and say, this is the formula for success? And they're thinking, no. And I asked them, did you take a class in school called relationship intelligence? And they realized that they haven't learned any of this information in school. So the only references that we have are what society tells us, what we see on TV, what we see other couples doing who probably have the same exact problems that we do, which is not really a good place to get that information. And so I realized that I was suffering in my relationships with myself and other people because of the lack of education. And so a lot of other people were as well.
Yeah, and I love what you hit on about like nobody is teaching this. I know, especially when it comes to personal finance, like so often people say like, I wish they were teaching this stuff in schools. And I think, shortage of information about personal finance specifically, there's no shortage of information. The information is not the problem, right? The problem is all of these other lived experiences that we have that influence like how we are and how we react to money, etc. But then in relationships,
we can recognize what our own backstory is, but how much do we really know about our partners and what their backstory is also, and how they also come to the relationship? And sometimes when people are having, let's just say like arguments about money, and it's not really about the money. It's there are so many other skills that we need to learn about how to actually identify what is the root of the feelings that I'm feeling right now, right? If somebody is mad at somebody for what we would, call a financial behavior of, overspending or, hiding debt or something like that, it's one thing to recognize that, like, I'm frustrated with you about this situation, but also why? Like, what is it within me that's bothered by that? Because, we could just observe and be curious about, like, what was going on for you when that was happening, right? Or what are you feeling that's making you want to spend? But also, that's one thing to be, non-judgmental and observing, and it's a whole different thing to say, what is it that's causing me to have these feelings of frustration? Is it like, it makes me feel abandoned, it makes me feel unrecognized, it makes me feel, my security is at risk or whatever, right? So it's so much deeper. And I think, yeah, it's one thing to understand all of that about yourself. It's another to really be vulnerable with someone and share those things about yourself, and then also how to draw that out from your partner as well. Because some people are just not really super comfortable talking about, all the other deeper work, right? Yeah, sometimes they're
Absolutely.
just not. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything you said is correct. We don't understand the root cause of problems in our relationship. And it's never about who didn't take out the trash. It's never about money. It's never about these surface issues. It's always about the relationship intelligence. So when
Yeah.
couples are fighting about money, the first thing that they're fighting about is their value system, because
Mhm.
that is the base of every relationship, is the value system. And if two people have different values, that's going to cause a lot of issues. Once you do have the same values and you still have problems, then it's about how you're navigating or not navigating your relationship.
Mm.
So relationship intelligence, self-awareness, that's exactly what you're talking about. Understanding your own behavior, understanding your own triggers, your own traumas, your feelings, and really understanding how you show up in your relationship. If both partners can do this, practice that self-awareness, they're going to have so much more insight into their own relationship with themselves and how they show up in their relationship. And then the self-management is, how do I behave? How do I respond to those traumas, to those triggers, to those insecurities? Are you aware that you're overspending, and how are you responding to your overspending? And then we have the relationship awareness. So being aware of each other's traumas and triggers and behaviors and things like that. And then lastly, we have relationship management. How do I respond if my partner overspends? What do I do? Do I yell at them? Do I get mad? Do I say, let's work through this together? Do I find resources and support? How do I respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more about this, because I know that I have a lot of experiences with, working with couples who, I should say, working with people who are in relationship, and, they're coming to me for help with their money, but very often I'm only working with one person in the couple. Sometimes the other person maybe doesn't want to participate. Maybe they're like, yeah, you go ahead and do it and report back to me and let me know how it goes. There's a lot of different scenarios there. But I do think that ultimately it's really important for oftentimes most people to be hearing the messages, that you're teaching, or, the skills that you're trying to incorporate. So how would you say people can deal with when they're trying to personally grow and they're trying to do better, and they're in a relationship with someone where all of this is just kind of a non-starter? They're not willing to be vulnerable, they're not willing to be open. How do you generally, advise people, can do this when they want to do this work, they want to help the relationship, but maybe the other person isn't participating as much?
That's a good question. So I have this happen all the time. So if you want to invest and you want to really create that relationship intelligence in your relationship and use that to create an amazing life with your partner, but your partner is not on board, I would say there's really two things that you can do. The first one is that you can use persuasion and insight. So a lot of times we're not always on the same page at the same time. And that's something that we understand when we understand interdependence. When I see something and I experience something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are. And so what I can do is I can start to use that persuasion and that insight to paint a picture to my partner about what is the outcome, what could be the benefits if we do this together. So instead of saying, you never participate, you don't want to invest in our relationship because you don't love me or something like that, you do the opposite with just painting that beautiful picture. Imagine if we could get our finances together and we can take that trip that we've always wanted to take. Or imagine, how amazing our relationship can be if we learn to stop fighting and we learn to communicate and we have understanding and respect and we're, walking in alignment with our values as a couple. So you paint that picture of the happy, memories that you're going to create and the happy experiences that you're going to have. So painting that picture with persuasion can allow them to come, maybe it's just baby steps, but come in because they'll be, oh, that sounds nice. That sounds like something that I would enjoy and I would benefit from. So they come on their own behalf because you've painted that picture. If you do that and your partner still has no interest, I would go ahead and have a more serious conversation about where the two of you are going as a couple. Because if your partner is willing to say, you know what, I don't want to do this, but I would like to do that, then the two of you can use negotiation to figure out which is the best plan. But if they're not willing to do anything, then I would go ahead and talk to them about the relationship itself and where are the two of you going. So the first step to creating a thriving relationship is creating a common vision. What are the expectations and values of the relationship? If my expectation is to be financially secure or financially free, to have that communication, to build a beautiful life together where we travel and we have fun and we, enjoy our time together, my question to my partner would be, do you see that the same way? Is that your expectation? Is that something that you want? They're either going to say yes or they're going to say no. If they say no, then the two of you have to see if you're actually compatible to be in a relationship together. If they say that they do want that, then the question is, okay, how do we get there? Maybe my idea is something that you're not interested in. Let's get a paper and a pen and write down all the ways that we can get there. But as long as we are working together to get to the same place, it can work. But if you're not interested at all, then we are looking at this relationship in two different ways. We're looking at our future in two different ways. And that means that I'm going one way, you're going the other, and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I think that when you touched on, just like talking about your values and whether or not they're shared values, I also think that is an exercise that people don't often do either at all or early enough or like specific to relationships. And I don't know about you, but I feel like these kind of things can also change. So I mean, I feel like we have certain core values that are they're really just kind of core to who we are and how we move throughout our entire lives. Like I think like religion might be a good example of that. Like if you are a spiritual or religious person, chances are you can have a lot of life circumstances happen to you and that value may or may not change for you at all, more than likely not. But sometimes I think once we have kids, we can realize that, our values are I don't want to say that they're easy to fluctuate, but you might realize that you're having shifts in your life a little bit that are causing you to want to maybe lean into something a little bit more, even if it's just for a season of life too. So I do think it's important for people to look at their values, but then also realize that maybe I would say the priorities. The priorities can change, right, as we move through life too. Because especially if you're young and career driven, like that's probably kind of a core value for you as far as like, you know, what you're working towards in your life. And different circumstances happen to us all the time that just kind of cause a shift of like an aha moment or a life's too short moment or something like that also. Yeah. So, you know, when speaking about how, you know, values and or priorities can change, I think, again, it's important to recognize how much our relationships also can change, like throughout the life of the relationship, whatever that may be. One thing that I wanted to ask you about also, we talked about this a little bit before when we met previously, when you've got folks who are either maybe starting to enter a relationship that's getting serious, or you know they're looking for a relationship. You had mentioned that that's kind of like, for you, that feels like the prime time to be working with folks, right? It's like, let's really like set you up for success with a great and healthy foundation in your relationship. But I'm also curious, what I don't know, what are your thoughts, or what is your approach? Like, how do you feel about couples who have maybe been together for 10, 15 years? They're just kind of in a grind and they're doing life, and things just aren't really feeling all that great anymore. You know, how do you feel about like getting those couples back on track as opposed to when people are doing this work to set up the healthy relationship from the beginning?
It's absolutely possible to turn your relationship around as long as the two of you are still in love. So the two questions that I ask every couple that I work with before agreeing to work with them is, are you in love and are you willing to do the work? Because I actually can't do either one of those things. So as long as they're still in love and they're willing to do the work, they can turn their relationship around at any point. It is more difficult if you've gotten to the point of contempt, which is kind of like a hatred for your partner. You sort of look at them like, "Oh, I can't stand them." When that sinks in, that is the most difficult time to turn the relationship around. But the time of the relationship, the duration doesn't really matter. It can be, you know, after 10 years or after 20 years, as long as you still have that love. I would say the difference between a couple that has just gotten together and a couple that's been together for 10 or 20 years is the limiting beliefs that they have, because they've had so much practice with misinformation that it really requires them to be able to rewrite that tape in their head, stop those bad habits, you know, change their behavior. It's like if you've grown up eating McDonald's and drinking Coca-Cola for 30 years, it is a little bit more difficult than if you've, you know, done it for 10 years. So we can absolutely change those relationships around. It's just about recognizing the two of you have been together for 10 years, 20 years. In what part of your relationship did you actually cultivate relationship intelligence? What moment of this relationship did you build a foundation for success? And again, they're going to say, we didn't. And so that highlights that it's not that you're a bad person or your partner's a bad person. It's not that you're enjoying this suffering and your partner's enjoying the suffering. The two of you are both suffering because you haven't been taught how to create a thriving relationship. And that's actually less on you and more on society, because you haven't even realized, I don't know what I don't know, right? You haven't realized that that's a thing. So give each other grace and compassion. And as long as you're in love and you're willing to do that work, you can absolutely turn it completely around.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you. So I want to come back to the relationship intelligence. I know for me I hadn't heard that particular phrase, but you know, I've heard of emotional intelligence, and there's a lot of work around that too. But what you just alluded to sounded like some of the just the skills that people can build, right, as it relates to relationship intelligence. So I know that's part of your Power Couples PhD program. And so I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more about just relationship intelligence, you know, kind of what is it, and what's the work that people are putting in, you know, to help build that muscle.
Relationship intelligence is so beautiful. It is so beautiful because it gives us so much power to create not only the relationship that we love, but the life that we love. It has the ability to allow us to overcome trauma, generational poverty, generational ignorance. It is such a powerful tool, and that I'm so passionate about. So in its essence, relationship intelligence is understanding and navigating your relationship successfully. So it's having the tools and techniques that you need to navigate your relationship with yourself and with your partner, your friends, your family, and the community around you. So let's just talk about our partner. When we are in a relationship, there are so many limiting beliefs. Relationships are hard. Marriage is hard, right? We've all heard that. That fighting is normal, and some people say it's even healthy. We had the idea that you're going to get bored after a while, once you are together for a certain amount of time, it's just going to get dull. You're going to get into that roommate stage. You're going to stop having sex. And it's just the way that it's going to be. This is absolutely not the way that it has to be. Yes, most people fall into these patterns because, again, we're just all following down the rabbit hole at the same speed because we don't know what we're doing. But once you learn relationship intelligence, you can communicate effectively. That means that you and your partner understand each other all the time. People say, I don't understand you, or I don't understand why you would do that, or you never understand what I'm talking about. We can cure misunderstandings in an instant if we understand what understanding means. So you can have effective communication and communicate effectively every single conversation that you can possibly have with your partner. It's really just understanding how to do that. You can create an entire relationship without fighting. So yes, people have said, I've seen therapists, I've seen doctors, I've seen thought leaders say, fighting is good, it's healthy, you should fight more. I'm actually an advocate for the opposite side. Yes, couples fight, but it's completely unnecessary and it brings zero value to the relationship. Fighting includes being in a situation where you are defensive or you're criticized or criticizing. There's frustration, there's anger, there's disappointment, there's all these negative emotions that come with fighting. My question is, can we have a problem in our relationship, have that effective communication, have brainstorming, compromise, negotiation, work through our problems without the fighting, without the frustration, the defensiveness? Can we do that in a way that's connective and compassionate and showing up for your partner in a really authentic way and saying, you know what, we have a problem, but guess what? Problems are a part of life. We're not going to get flustered. We're not going to get overwhelmed. We're going to sit down. We're going to go through a technique. I call it the power couple technique. We're going to go through a technique, work through this problem and find a solution. Because when you're in a relationship, you have to understand that problems are going to come, the same as problems are going to come if you're single, right? It's just a part of life. But if we have a technique to work through those problems, then we don't have to have all the negative aspects that come with fighting. It's problem solving as opposed to fighting. It's
Yeah.
also things like interdependence. How do we practice interdependence and understand I'm a whole human being and my partner is a whole human being? And how do we balance the three entities in a relationship? We've heard so many times, you're my better half, I'm nothing without you, 50-50, all that stuff. But it's not. It's actually two people come together not to make one, but to make three. There's me, my partner, and then us as a couple. How do we balance those things? And so there's all these different nuggets, skills, tools, techniques, all these things that once we understand it and we put it together, it creates a really solid foundation on which our relationship can then thrive.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. There's so much to be said for having I guess I would just say, like, even just the maturity to hold your partner in a safe space while they're able to share openly, right? Because I know that this was something that I felt like I experienced was it when you do share openly and then the other person just kind of like shuts you down or dismisses you or just says like, well, that like invalidates your concern, it makes you less likely to then want to, open up in the future. I will say, since I got a divorce 3 years ago, and since then I feel like I've done so much personal work. And I think the funny and interesting part is that once you start to develop these skills, I feel like whenever you hear your friends telling their stories about like their arguments or their fights, like you find all these opportunities to like coach on how to do it better, right? So I do feel like learning these things can have such a great ripple effect where then we do start to talk about it more, because I think, it's kind of the same thing, we were talking about of teaching, kids more about money in school, it's like sometimes the teachers don't know exactly what to say either, you know. And with relationships, if we're not getting really great guidance, you know, maybe it's just also because they haven't developed the skills and the tools. And I think once we have developed these skills and tools, then you're so much, you stand in your own confidence in that, right? And then you're able to kind of share with people, you know, here's a situation that I had where we had an interesting circumstance come up, but here's how we talked it out without having it be an argument, right? And that's really inspiring for people too. So yeah, I love it. I think this has been a fantastic conversation, Railey, and I am wondering if you could just tell everybody how they can learn more about your program, stay connected with you. How do they come into your world?
Yes. I am on Instagram and Facebook, Railey Molinario. As long as you can spell it, you'll find me. Um, and then I do invite everyone to go to RaileyMolinario.com to enter my contest. I run a contest on my website where you can enter to win 1 free month of relationship coaching. So you only have to go to RaileyMolinario.com. You pop in your email in that pop-up window and you will be entered to win.
I love it. That's great. And I will, of course, link to all of that in the description as well, too. So that was wonderful information today. Thank you, Railey, so much for joining us. I think what you're doing is really great work, and it's definitely necessary. Like, even if people are not currently in a relationship, it's still really good to have this information because you can carry it through to so many other aspects of your life, too. So, yeah. Thank you again. I really appreciate you joining me today, and have a great day.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified every time a new video comes out. You can also check out this playlist where I have other videos all about relationships and money. All right, if you also want to have a little bit of fun, you and your significant other can take a money personality quiz on my website, which I'll also link to below. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.